All right, we're live, you guys.
Man, love to be live. Welcome to the Pistons Talk Podcast on YouTube. I'm your host, Lance Caprosi. Follow me on Twitter at Lance Caprosi. Then follow my co-host, Anthony, at Pistons Talk across all social media platforms. Anthony started the brand. I hitched my wagon to it. Before we get started, we're going to welcome special guest, Armand, a.k.a. Pistons Draft Talk PDT. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at the same handle. The links are in the description below. Now we can get this started. All right, Bobby Marks, such a strange name, drops one hell of a mock trade, and I absolutely love it. Look, before anybody says anything, whether it's in the comments or whether it's on YouTube, want to say anything, just let me get this off. There's only two ways the Pistons get superstars. They either draft them or they trade for a disgruntled player. But this is an opportunity for them to draft a potential, trade for a potential top 5 guy when he's healthy. I love Isaiah Stewart probably more than anybody else, but this would be a Godfather offer for him. This is like peak value for Isaiah Stewart, Bojan, and the 5th pick. You're not going to find anybody that has that type of potential at 5 unless someone drops, but it's highly unlikely. But let me hear your guys' thoughts, man. Like, what do you guys think about this mock trade? Anthony, I'll turn it over to you first.
I think that this was an actual trade. You make it 10 out of 10 times. If it was an actual trade. I know it's a hypothetical. Saw guys at 97 with the ticket said they wouldn't take it, which I think is kind of funny. If you can get a player of Zion's caliber for Marvin Bagley, Bojan, and the 5th pick, you make that trade 10 out of 10 times. I understand the health thing. I understand, the off the court stuff. I think last time he was in Detroit, he fell asleep on the bench. He was falling asleep. I mean, stuff like that, I understand, but you're not going to get a player, in my opinion, at 5 that has that same talent level as Zion.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a gamble that, again, if it's offered, you have to take, because Zion, when he's on the floor, is one of the best players in the league. He's already proven that. But Armand, what do you think about this mock trade?
Yeah, I'm with Anthony here. It's just very unlikely that, Pelicans would want to reach and let go of Zion for a guy like Cam Whitmore or Jarris, whoever the player is. It's just not going to be in the same caliber. And I know you got to think injuries with Zion. He's been injury prone throughout his career, but if he's healthy, you're getting a guy who's worth number 1 pick level. So it's it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And Bojan is again a guy who the Pelicans could definitely use. Is just Bojan 5'31". It just doesn't seem likely. So obviously, if it's true and it somehow happens, that would be amazing for us. And I would totally do it. I'm willing to believe Zion, if healthy, he's definitely a game changing type of talent. But it just doesn't seem like this is kind of a likely scenario.
Yeah, I think a lot of people heard the Scoot news, obviously, with the Pelicans trying to trade up, and then they don't even want to attach, from what I've heard, Zion or Brandon Ingram. They want to use the picks that they got from the Anthony Davis trade to try to trade up to either 2 or 3, which I kind of think it's unlikely. But I feel like a lot of people just saw that Scoot report with the Pelicans and just kind of assumed that Zion was going to get traded for Scoot Henderson, in my opinion.
Okay, out of these three teams, we know Detroit says yes. New Orleans, they say yes. But Charlotte, do you think they'd be the odd team out? Because they just had a report, I believe, where they would want to take Brandon Ingram for the 2nd overall pick. But do you think? It kind of feels like they're getting kind of gypped out of this trade scenario. Anybody?
Yeah, I'm so Charlotte was the offer is Ingram or 2, so Scoot or Brandon, whoever the Pelicans want. I would assume Scoot obviously is the heavy favorite, but I think if you look at fit and kind of what works, and if they want to speed up the process, then Brandon's definitely the guy they probably want. He's going to fit mesh well with LaMelo. And then I think what they would want to do is approach and get guys around those two. Those are their 2 guys for the future. I would say Charlotte's down to do it. I know it's been Scoot and Brandon throughout the whole process, and even more so Brandon. So Brandon's kind of a guy in the threshold where he's kind of in that Brandon Ingram kind of mold. Not the same player, but if they want a guy like Ingram or Brandon Miller, why not go for the guy who's more experienced? And maybe Brandon Miller never hits that ceiling like Ingram. So I can definitely see Charlotte doing that trade if Ingram's on the table, but that's just if he's on the table.
Yeah. What do you think would be a better duo, though? And anybody can answer this. Scoot Henderson and Zion in Charlotte, or LaMelo and Brandon Ingram Brandon Ingram and LaMelo in Charlotte, and then Scoot and Zion in New Orleans. Like, what would you have more? Who would you have more fun rooting for out of those two duos?
Scoot and Zion for sure. That's definitely the one I would love to see happen. You blend those two athleticisms, which are fantastic athleticism display. Scoot's playmaking and the pick and roll, throwing lobs to Zion, and then Zion can get his own shot. That'll be one of the most exciting young duos in the league.
Yeah, I would probably agree. Zion and Scoot. Like, New Orleans needs a point guard bad. Like, I think the only point guard they have is Kyra Lewis, and I haven't heard shit from him because he's been injured, it seems like, throughout his whole career so far. But, I mean, I feel like some people forget that Kyra Lewis is even a Pelican. But, I mean, like, I'm rooting for him. I was really high on him coming out of the draft. But definitely, like, that combination, just like what Pistons Draft Talk said, the supreme athleticism, I mean, it would be must-see TV.
Oh, it would be so much fun. An instant league pass team. You would have you would definitely pay to watch those two play a game. Well, let's move on. So Brian Windhorst suggests that the Portland Trail Blazers, the Houston Rockets, the Detroit Pistons, the Dallas Mavericks are looking to trade out of the first round and, get rid of their picks. But I mean, every offseason we get rumors about star players. And if there's a chance to convert a first round pick, and one of them teams have to do it. But with the new CBA in place, I feel like, maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, with the new CBA in place, it's probably more likely for teams to keep their first round picks. But I guess what I'm going to ask is, how likely is it for the Pistons to trade their fifth pick?
I think I would say it's sort of 50-50. And that's because I don't think we are going to trade out of 5 just to try to cash in on superstar, because there's going to be 0 superstar level talents obviously available at 5. And even if you want an all-star kind of guy, I just don't feel like Weaver's the type of guy to like speed up the process. They'll go kind of what other organizations might do. So I think it's more likely if we do trade out 5, we're trading back for maybe 9 and 16 with another talent evolved for Utah. So then you get maybe your guy, and maybe the Pistons want Hendricks at 5, and they know Hendricks is not going to go 6 or 7, and so he might be there at 9. So they take the gamble, they get Hendricks, and then someone else at 16, and then now you have 2 young talents who can also develop into the process that we kind of want. So I think that's a lot more likely than for a Sprint All-Star.
Get that.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't think I see them trading it, as I feel like you can still get a good player at 5. Obviously it sucks that we fell to 5, but I feel like you can get a contributor, a guy that can be a rotational player. I think right off the bat, it doesn't really matter who you get at 5. But if they were to trade down, it, like Pistons Draft Talk said, I do see it as a team like, I don't know. Pacers have 3 draft picks, but I think their other first round picks are really late. But I could see it with a team, that has a few. But like I would have a really hard time. It just doesn't seem like something Troy would do. Like I could definitely see him just keeping it, like, drafting a Jarace Walker or a Cam Whitmore, whatever, and just kind of living with it. Because I don't think there's a whole lot of teams that want to trade up, unless someone like this slips, like Amin Thompson's there, for instance, and Orlando wants him. We talked about that last week. Like, do they offer you 6 and 11 for 5? Like, I don't know. But I think if I were a betting man, I would bet on the Pistons just keeping that 5th overall pick and just drafting their guy there.
I mean, because with the new CBA, man, I've read it a few times, not the whole thing, just like a summary and everything. But it seems like first round picks and really second round picks, I guess, are just going to be that much more valuable to team building. So I don't really see a team like the Pistons, who are going to be on the verge of, extending Cade, Jaden Ivey, and then Duren and Isaiah Stewart here a little bit, getting rid of any first round picks to try to bring in larger contracts, unless it is, like we were talking about earlier, a Godfather type deal where you're bringing in someone like a Zion Williamson or a Brandon Ingram, like a guy like that type of talent. You're gonna, like we all said, you're gonna get rid of the 5th pick for that. But where they currently stand, I just think that first pick is just too valuable because it keeps your salary a little bit lower for a few years, where you can actually still bring in talent and improve your team. But we can move on to news if you guys want to.
For sure. I mean, like I said, I just don't see him trading it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely either. It's just we always get these random, rumors or these mocks. Like, I don't even know what the chance is of them actually trading it. I liked what Armand was saying, where he was, you might trade back, but you're still keeping yourself in the lottery. I just don't. I think that scenario is pretty likely for the Pistons because, Taylor Hendricks, he'll probably be drafted somewhere around 7, 8, or 9. That's most likely. Jarace Walker, I mean, he could easily slip out of the top 5 if the Pistons don't take him. I mean, Thompson might slip, so another team might want to move in. But I don't even know if that's what Brian Windhorst was, trying to say, that they're going to completely trade out of the first round. I don't see that happening, but I just see the Pistons potentially trading back and going to get their guy because that ultimately saves them a little bit of money. But in terms of news, Tim Hardaway Jr. and the Mavericks offering the 10th pick for Bojan Bogdanovic is a trade that could be in play per Draft Express. Do you buy that the Mavs would actually make a trade like this?
No, I don't think they do. And I'm not saying, I think it was Gavoni that reported that. I'm not saying Gavoni's necessarily wrong with what he's saying here. He probably has heard that. I've heard from other people that Gavoni likes to play with his words, and so he likes to meddle with stuff because he's a reporter, and at the same time, you want the report to sound like plausible enough so fans can get interested and excited. But for the Mavs alone to trade 10 for Bojan and Tim Hardaway Jr. No, for Bojan and Tim Hardaway Jr. and 10 for Bojan, I just don't see why in the hell they would do that. Personally, I just don't think they're in that desperate of a situation. Give for Bojan at least.
Yeah, I agree. I just, the Mavs are in a weird situation. Like, I thought they were going to trade for DeAndre Ayton because it feels like they just kind of need to get a legitimate setter with Luka, but I don't know. Like, I think it was 10 and 31 for Bojan. And then you get Tim Hardaway Jr., who I like him, but I don't. I know his contract. If you do look at his contract, it does go down in value. But again, like, doesn't really do anything for the Mavs unless Luka Doncic is making the trade and he dislikes Bojan that much.
Yeah, but that's the play. But that's the key, right, Luka?
Yeah.
Like, the Mavericks want to make him happy. They know the clock is ticking. It's not because he's an older player. It's just that he wants to win. Like, he wants to be one. He wants to compete in the Western Conference. So a 10th pick, it might help them immediately. Probably not. The Mavericks have a weird history with draft picks. I mean, they hit some, but it seems like there's a lot of misses on their resume. So I 100% think the Mavericks would do this. Why not go out and get a proven veteran like Bojan? Yeah, he might only have like another 2 or 3 years in the league playing at a high level like he has been for the Pistons, but he's a win now player for you. He's not going to take away he's not going to take away from Luka. He fits in nicely with what they're trying to do, where it just seems to be let Luka have the ball and let him just control the offense and make passes to whoever he wants. Bojan can stand in a corner and hit some shots. I 100% see the Mavericks making a trade like this. Maybe not for Bojan, but a trade similar to this, where I think the 10th pick is pretty valuable, especially in this draft, because we're talking about how deep it is. But again, I just think they're in a win now mode, and they're going to try to keep Luka happy. And I don't think draft picks keep him happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just I don't necessarily see them doing it for at least Bojan and 31. But if that was the case and they somehow did that, obviously that would be one of the best things we've done. We was done. So we'll see what happens. I'm not necessarily buying it. I've known for the past couple of years now that there's a lot of smoke screen and you don't know which is true. The only ones I'm really trusting are Shams or Watch is obviously tweeting it out.
Yeah.
Because then you know it's 100% for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just really can't see them doing this.
Yeah, I mean, Gavoni, I've always kind of felt like you said, he kind of just puts stuff out, and it's kind of clickbaity. Like if Mike Schmitz was still doing it, I would believe it. But I don't know. I've always kind of felt like that with like Gavoni. He'll like put something out, and like it's just like I don't really fully believe it. I think it's just for clicks at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I think
it was the thing where he said Brandon Miller went to a workout completely out of shape, and in reality he was just sick. And so again, he plays with the words. So he's not really he was out of shape, but it was because he was sick, and so they miss out context. So I don't know if I trust Gavoni, honestly.
well, let's say this trade goes through. How do you, Armand? Do you like the fit with Tim Hardaway Jr. on the Pistons, or do you not really see that working?
I can see that as a 1 year rental. Where I mean, I don't know how much left the years he has got on his contract left, but I think one more, right? And so he's what he is what he is. He's a really good streaky shooter, but he can really shoot it. He's going to provide some much needed scoring off the bench. I think the hope is he improves as a defender, but even then, you really get a spark plug off the bench. Kind of what we had in Alec Burks this year. I would think a little bit of a higher degree kind of shooter, but at the end of the day, the real value is that 10th pick. And
Yeah.
so whoever you get at 10 is going to be an immediate impact. Not I wouldn't say immediate impact, but immediate impact in the future, long term wise. That's the real asset there.
Yeah, his contract ends in 2024-25. So he'd be on the books, he'd be on there for a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I just obviously the reward is the 10th pick.
Yeah.
I was just looking at it like I don't know if I like Tim Hardaway Jr. on the Pistons because of Alec Burke, because of Ivy, and because of Cade. I don't know if he can play. He probably could play the three, but I just feel like it would be just a liability, even because he's streaky as an offensive player and he's just not that great of a defender. He brings certain skills to the team, but he just can't be relied upon night in and night out.
Yeah, like I said, you have Alec Burks on the roster who I don't want to say they're similar players, but you're getting them at a $10 million price point versus I think Burks is like 18 million for next year. So I much rather have Burks, even though like I feel like Burks is actually more consistent now. I'm actually talking myself into it. I think Burks is more of a consistent player off the bench, personally.
I just like his game compared to Tim Hardaway Jr.'s. Like the foul baiting, getting to the line. He has such an old school game to me. I just love it. We got one more piece of news for you guys, and that's the Golden State Warriors are willing to trade Jonathan Kuminga for a first-round pick. This also comes from Draft Express. I don't know if the rumor is the Pistons trading the 5th pick for Kuminga, but let's just hear what you guys think about this trade. Pistons offer the 5th pick. They bring in Kuminga. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What is the allure to Jonathan Kuminga in trading the 5th pick? And I'll turn it over to you, Armand. What are your thoughts on this?
I would dislike that completely. And I think Kuminga's still a raw product with 2 to 3 years of improving. I just didn't think we saw a jump necessarily from year one to year two. There were some aspects of the game he improved on. But at the end of the day, he's still kind of, in a sense, he's still a project and still has years to go. Whereas really that kind of what they believed in all-star caliber talent. And I don't know, it's just you look at 5 and you have a guy like Jarris Walker who I think comes in and brings a lot more production than you get out of Kuminga. And then even then you throw in Kuminga, who's an amazing athlete, but you can also say Cam Whitmore is in that same sense where he's an explosive first step and a vertical threat. So I don't really see why we would trade out of 5. I think Kuminga's value is past that now. That was maybe back in 2021, but now it's 2 years in advance and he hasn't gotten much better since he was a rookie. So I don't know if that would happen. I would be very, very mad and disappointed. But again, I think if it's a trade for Kuminga, if we get 9 and 16, I'm saying I'm just theoretically if we get 9 and 16, I kind of see Warriors making maybe like 16 and Boyan, but that's gonna it's a little hard to process that the whole details for that. But I don't know, 5, no way for me.
Yeah, when I've watched Jonathan Kuminga, there's some plays where he just blows your mind, where you're like, wow, if this dude could put it all together, he would be a pretty solid player. I think he's going to be in the NBA for a long time. I don't see multiple time all-star like some people like to throw out. I don't see that from him. I just think he's going to be a solid rotation and role player for whatever. And I guess maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but like when I watch him play, I don't see any real elite skills that separate him from anybody else. You know, like he's a great athlete, but he's not a great rebounder. He's not a great scorer. He's not great on defense. He's good at a lot of things. He's just not great in any area. Or am I missing something with Jonathan Kuminga?
No, I'm with you. He's just kind of a guy who's got the athletic tools that most players don't have. You can't teach that stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's not great at much things, and his shooting, it did improve a little bit this year, but it's not an elite catch and shoot guy. You're never gonna play him off the movement shooting. He's not the greatest space creator and his best trace on offense comes from him being a athletic monster, just cutting and dunking and finishing around the rim through contact. He's got those type of things, but as a creator and stuff like that, stuff you want your guy like Kuminga, in order to be an all-star, to me at least, he would have to improve his own handle, his ability to create for himself, and not rely on others to get him his shots. So I don't know. I'm not really sold on Kuminga, and I don't know. He's just he's still a little bit of a upside guy right now.
For sure. It would be kind of cool to see him in that Hamidou role, how they used Hami this past season, though, kind of as like that athletic big, just finding him in that dunker spot. I could see that working with Jonathan Kuminga here, but again, for the 5th pick, I would pass. But what about you, Anthony?
It's funny because I remember the draft process for his draft, and people are labeling him as the next Jaylen Brown. I don't know if you guys remember that. Everyone's saying this guy's the next Jaylen Brown.
I remember that.
I think the Warriors, they just want vets. I think they tried the young guy experiments. I mean, they traded James Wiseman to us. They basically told everyone, hey, we want to get rid of Kuminga. I think his value is pretty low. To both of your guys' point, I think he needs another 2 years to develop. I think he needs G League time personally. I think, the spending some time in the G League, perfecting his craft, I think would be great for him. Because I just think if you give him any kind of NBA minutes, I think he's going to make a lot of mistakes because he just doesn't have the reps or the experience, much like James Wiseman. I think he's a good player. I'm not trading 5 for him. To Armand's point, Jarvis Walker, to me, I think he's one of the better defenders in this whole draft class, and I think he's a day one contributor. Cam Whitmore, guy jumps out of the gym. I mean, I feel like Cam Whitmore offensively has a deeper bag than Jonathan Kuminga right now. I mean, you could even talk about other players. Like, I think Anthony Black and him, I would probably rate Anthony Black a little bit higher than Jonathan Kuminga right now. He just needs a whole lot of reps. And I think if you were to trade for him, you're not trading a first round pick. I don't think there's going to be a team that would kind of take a flyer on him just because it's just such an unknown and a question mark right now.
It's a good answer. I like that. Yeah, I'd pass with the 5th pick. I mean, if they want a veteran for him, I'd be willing to part with some of these guys on the team. But again, because now I'm just thinking about him in that Hami role where I'm like, man, that would be kind of exciting, like just another athlete on the team that's limited. But if you put him in the right spot, they can be effective. But yeah, I would definitely pass on Jonathan Kuminga. Again, I don't see the potential there like I still see with the Zion. I would rather take a physically broken Zion, and gamble with his health than take a healthy Jonathan Kuminga. That might sound crazy to some people, but there's just, I'd give up the 5th pick for that, not Jonathan Kuminga though.
Yeah, like I said, he just needs more playing time. I just don't think, I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe a team does offer a vet for him if they want to get younger at that position, but I just don't see it.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So everybody's favorite prospect among the Pistons fans is Emoni Bates. But why do you believe Emoni Bates gets talked about getting drafted so high among Pistons fans? Because there are Pistons fans out there that want them to use the 5th pick. I don't know if they're trolling when they say that, though. I don't know. It feels like they're serious, but you never know. They could be trolling. But why do you guys think Pistons fans are just so high on Emoni Bates? Arman, you can answer this first.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's just more so a misconception with those fans because they've thrown Emoni Bates. Not them, but like the media has thrown Emoni Bates as this next Kevin Durant since he was 14 years old. And again, at the same time, that's never okay. I never like when they throw on kids that are so young these worldwide expectations that, because most of the times they're never going to pan out unless you're LeBron. And that was the only time that's ever panned out. But so since Emoni's been, 14, 13, and he was a problem then, but his game kind of never, advanced. He never really grew as an athlete, and obviously doesn't have the craziest wingspan either. So he's reliant on his tough shot making to really get by, and he wasn't the most efficient player. So I mean, there's concerns obviously, and he's definitely not a top 5 talent or even a first round in my opinion. But it's just he's from Michigan. He's been in the media as a generational-esque prospect since he was 14, and obviously that hasn't panned out. But I guess that's like the only reason why I guess Pistons fans are still attached to Emoni. I honestly think we see it every single year with highly ranked guys coming in that don't pan out. I mean, Brandon Boston back in 2021 had a lot of fans saying he should go lottery just because he was hyped up to be a top 5, top 10 pick. So that's just kind of how it goes. But I don't know. Maybe at 31, I wouldn't want Emoni at 31, but I would definitely say that would probably get the fan base really hyped up for that.
Let me ask you though. So this is what I've been saying. Like if I'm in Emoni Bates' ear and I'm a team that drafts him, I've said this a couple of times on this podcast, I would just have him watch film of Duncan Robinson, Kyle Korver, and JJ Redick, because whoever drafts him or signs him, because I think it's closer that he goes undrafted over being drafted. I don't think you're not going to bring him in and be like, you're going to be the guy. We're going to give you the ball. The handle's too loose. I don't think he's that great at creating his own shot, but he does have a good enough jumper where I think if you just taught him some great footwork and taught him how to come off of screens to get that shot off, he could probably have a solid career in the NBA. I don't think he's going to blow you away, but as a shooter and a guy that can move without the ball, I think that's a role for him. How do you feel about that? Is that a decent assessment or is that way off in your opinion?
No, that's right on. Because I mean, as I see it, is there's no way in hell in any NBA organizations letting him be the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. It doesn't matter. The point is he's gonna have to adapt and find a way to not be the guy anymore. You have to be an off-ball guy. You have to move without the ball. And he's shown flashes in Eastern Michigan to be an off-ball movement shooting kind of guy. But in his head, it's just, I'm the guy. I'm going to get my own shot. So he's going to have to adapt. He's going to have to find ways to score without him having the ball in his hands. And that's the only way I see him playing day one in the NBA. I think it's more likely he drops 30 a game in the G League in his rookie season. And there's no issue with that. It's just, in order to really be a legit threat in the NBA for Emoni, he's going to have to be more of a movement, off-ball kind of guy. And there's times where he can probably get opportunities to be an on-ball guy and get his own shot. It's just he's not an NBA athlete, and so that's going to have concerns of him creating his own shot with the limited burst and athleticism at least.
Yeah, I would just show them, like, look how much Duncan Robinson made. Play like this guy, you're going to walk away with a $90 million contract someday. Why not? But Anthony, why do you think Pistons fans are so high on him?
I think, to both of your points, I think it's because he's a local kid. And obviously, I still vividly remember 7 Action News, Brad Galley going to his house, labeling him as the next KD, like at 14 years old. Like, obviously, I did get to cover a couple of his games, and Armand was right in that. He hasn't really improved his game. Like, he is, like, when you watch him, he makes some of the toughest shots that I've ever seen. Like, he's just an elite shot maker, in my opinion. But I don't think he goes first round. If I were to assess his draft position, I think it's like 40s to late 50s. And he might be a undrafted free agent. And maybe the Crews want to sell some tickets. Maybe you want to, sign Emoni Bates and, just run the table with those guys over there. But, like, I think it's just a local thing. I think he's really talented. I don't understand the first round draft buzz among fans saying, like, he's going to be the next KD. You guys are sleeping on him. You don't know what you're talking about. He's got this deep bag when we know he doesn't really have that deep of a bag. Like, he can score, but, like, everyone's saying he can average a triple-double. And I'm like, you guys aren't watching his film at all. Like, he does not look to pass often. He's looking to shoot that thing like 30 times a game.
Yeah, I don't know where the love has came from. I mean, I get the whole local playing at EMU coming from Ypsilanti. That's it's all great and everything. And I thought it was just crazy for people to label him the next Kevin Durant. The moment I watched him, I'm like, when he was in high school, I thought, this is a guy that knows his spots on the floor. He seems like a pretty smart player. I don't know where that went with him though. Like he really became just a volume shooter when he got to college. When I saw him in high school, there were moments where I'm like, dude, he really knows where his spots are. He knows how to get to his spots and he knows how to make them from those places. But when he gets to college, the script flipped on him. I don't know what he was trying to prove. I just think if he had, stuck going the same way, playing the same way like he was in high school, again, just from what I had seen, I thought he would have been all right in college. I think we'd still be talking about a potential first round pick, not a lottery pick, but a guy going in the first round if he had just kept developing the way he was in high school. I don't know what changed for him, and again, I have really no answer for why Pistons fans are so high on him, other than him being from Michigan. I get it, root for the local guy, but let's be real about this. Let's not pass on, a more talented player just because a guy's local.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the KCP draft. People wanted Trey Burke over KCP. Like, it's just a local thing, I believe.
Oh, man. All right, Armand, let's do this. This is a big one for us. I love draft talk, so I'm just going to ask you, who are your 5 at 5? And you can rank them, put them in any order you want, but who are your 5 prospects at the 5 spot?
Okay, for number 1, I'm gonna start off with the guy I want most, and I don't know if Amin's gonna go at 4 or if he's gonna be there. Regardless or not, I think I want Jarris the most personally out of anyone at 5. I think that's my guy. He's been my guy for a long time. He just fits really well. I actually think he's more. He hasn't shown his full offensive package. I think he was the 4th option at Houston. That was kind of what Kelvin Sampson wanted him to be. He wasn't to do anything else like he did at IMG when he was a high school prospect. I think he's got more to his game. But yeah, that's my guy, number 1, who I want for the Pistons.
Can I ask you one thing real quick about Trace Walker?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know he's kind of labeled as, he's a good defensive player. Like, I think, he can go up and down pretty much 1 through 5, and I think he'd be able to handle himself. Maybe not a full game guarding guards on the perimeter, but that's not what I'm asking. One thing that I watched from him defensively, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I felt like there were moments where he would let guys get by him, so then he could just kind of, because he's good at recovering, and I think he liked pinning guys' shots on the backboard and just blocking them from behind. Did you notice that in his game defensively, where it seemed like he was letting guys beat him off the dribble just so he could quickly recover and show the athleticism? Because I think that's, from what I saw, it felt like that was somewhat of a problem in his game.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that too. It was quite evident in the Auburn game that they played. Wendell Green, who was also a hometown kid, he had an isolation opportunity against Jarris and cooked him off the dribble, like got by him, but then Jarris immediately recovered and blocked his shot, and that's happened at least 5-6 times throughout the season, maybe more. Off the top of my head, it's just I don't know if it's more so him allowing defenders to do that. I think it's just those guys hit him with quick moves, and he wasn't able to process that quickly. So then his recovery obviously is great, and then he's able to block the shot. That's definitely could be one aspect of his defensive game that might get when he has guys like obviously Curry or Trae Young.
Yeah,
it's going to be a lot harder than when you're playing guys in college. But I don't know. I think he just moves his feet very well for the most part. He's obviously built, so. He's there's no player in college that had a hard time had an easy time trying to score against him. So I think he's so versatile on defense. He can guard any position, and offensively, I think he's more than he was at Houston. So he's kind of my guy at 5, and then I would go number 2. And I know it's not going to please a lot of Pistons fans because I don't know, overtime elite. Not a favorite by anyone really, but Amin is the guy I want after. I know the fit might be a little confusing at first, but he's a one-of-one type of athlete. He's just you can't teach some of the stuff he can do, but also at the same time, his processing and field is a lot more advanced than a lot of projects coming in. So I think he's gonna find himself probably in a couple of months after the start of a season. I think he's gonna take time, but I think he's gonna be a really, really good talent and really good player eventually. But I don't know if we're in the kind of midst to take another project, but I don't know. That's the guy I want there. And then number three, I would take Hendricks. I just think he fits just kind of like Jarris. Just you play him on defense, he can guard a lot of positions, and at the same time, he's gonna hit the 3-point shot whenever he wants him. He's also a lob threat. And then four be Cam Whitmore, and I know that's probably the favorite, but I don't know. I like Cam. I think he's a very talented player. I would be very okay with him at five. I just think some of the defensive stuff, which I know he's not a bad defender. I think he's a solid defender, but he could have been better. And offensively, he could have been more dominant. His processing and playmaking feel wasn't great. So I think there's a lot of concerns, but at the same time, he's a fantastic athlete, and he's stuff you can't teach. So those type of players, if they pan out, they're going to be very good. And then I think Asar is probably my last one at five. I don't know. It's just he's not the same type of creator and handler and at least getting to spots like his twin is. I think Amin's more advanced at that stage of his game, where I would say Asar is more likely to play more of an off ball kind of role. And the kind of hope is he's a 3-and-D type of talent, but his 3-point shooting isn't elite yet, or is not even in a good level. He shot, I think, 29% throughout the year. So I don't know. My five would be those guys for now.
So one thing I've said about Amin, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but when I watched some of the scouting tapes and watched a little bit of his games, I saw a guy, him and his brother, there were a lot of shots they were making that I just don't think will be available in the NBA due to the length and the athleticism of the players. I think they're, especially for Amin right away, his calling card is going to be in transition. So I don't know how effective he's going to be in the half court. But were there any shots that you saw that might have skewed his numbers where you're like, okay, yeah, that those aren't going to be available? It's going to be a little bit more difficult for him in the NBA.
Well, yes, it's almost going to be difficult because overtime elite to NBA jump is going to be a lot harder than it is for a college to NBA jump. But I think I'm a lot higher because when you look at a guy like Amin, he's a generational athlete. You know, there isn't a matchup where he isn't going by a player with ease. And so even if you NBA level athletes, I still think he's going to get by. The issue is his touch, and that's when you get to the spot, and he just doesn't have great touch right now. His finishing around the rim is not at the elite level you like for a guy at his level of athleticism. I also think he makes a lot of the shots and harder for himself. He does a little too much with his handle as well. Um, and I don't know if it's going to fly by in the league. I think guys who are elite defenders. I mean, Marcus Smart's going to have him in hell that first matchup. So I mean, it's definitely going to take a while, but I think with his level of athleticism and at least playmaking field right now is definitely going to bode a lot throughout the future. But yeah, I feel you. I think there's going to be shots where he was able to hit in overtime elite that aren't going to be as available in the NBA. So it's definitely going to be a transition.
So you mentioned Taylor Hendricks. I love Taylor Hendricks, by the way. I mean, Drace Walker's my guy at five, but Taylor Hendricks is number two for me. And it really I can flip those two any other day. But my concern with Taylor Hendricks is he's a great shooter, was in college, I believe 40% from three. And I know he's coming into the NBA as like a defensive player, but I still feel like there are parts of his game defensively that are going to need to be cleaned up. So I don't think he's going to be ready day one. Do you think Taylor Hendricks would be ready day one? Or do you think there are just some holes in his game that are going to keep him on the bench for a little while?
I don't think he's going to be as ready as Jarris day one, but I do think he's going to be on a level where he's playable enough. Like you can play him 20, 25 minutes a game and he's going to look at least solid. So I don't think he's going to be uh, anything crazy. I don't think he's going to be bad. I just think he's going to be solid for what he is. I think defensively, I think his one-on-one defense isn't on Jarris's level. I think he's still struggling with quicker guards at least, and his feet isn't as mobile. But he is a really tremendous shot blocker, the best shot blocker in this draft besides Wembanyama. And obviously his shooting is something that I'm it's interesting because throughout his high school AAU high school career, he's always been a sub-level shooter. He's been like 30% throughout his career. So he kind of just like jumped this year and shot 40%. So I don't know how legit it is. I think it's gonna probably fall a little bit to the 34, 35 range, but still at a great level. So I don't know. I think he's gonna be pretty fine, pretty solid. I don't think he's gonna be like number 5 worthy, but I think he's gonna be pretty solid.
So when you're scouting him, because I noticed that there are some players that you watch, their jump shot is almost always different every time they take it. Like, someone like Jason Tatum, like his jump shot looks the same almost every single time he shoots it. You don't get that with a lot of prospects. But when you're scouting Taylor Hendricks, did his jump shot seem pretty consistent from clip to clip? Or were there different things that you noticed in it that maybe, are going to have you go in a direction where the shooting's not real?
Well, it's interesting because I thought when he was in a catch and shoot stance, it's about the same every single time. But when he's kind of trying to do a little bit of movement shooting, which is very limited, he just kind of like it's a higher arcing shot every single time he does a movement shot, and sometimes that would result in some rough misses. But I feel like most of his movement shooting in the limited attempts were usually backboard shots. So I don't know. I don't think he's a movement kind of guy. I think you maybe I don't know if you guys would like him as a movement kind of shooter day one. I think he's not there yet as a shooter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was just thinking like he comes in, he's going to be a solid defensive player, but you're probably going to see him in the corner offensively. They're probably going to bring him in just to try to spread it out and create as much space for Cade and Ivy as they possibly can.
Yeah, that's where I see that.
Does the rebounding concern you?
I don't know. He's not as aggressive as I would like, and I personally think he's kind of soft and when he attacks the rim, and his finishing in the half court was pretty terrible. I think it was 44%, and so that's an issue with his strength. I think he's soft when he gets to the rim, and that results in him being a limited rebounder for at least what he is at his position. So defensively and shooting, you could probably say sure, but I think with the half court finishing and stuff like that, there's concerns that are going to be even more evident in the league. So, yeah, I think there still is a lot to grow with Hendricks. So
out of the 5 you mentioned, who has the highest floor and who has the highest ceiling?
I think Jarris has the highest floor and Amin has the highest ceiling, in my personal opinion.
Okay. Where do you see what is the peak for Jarace Walker? Like, what is his ceiling to you in the NBA?
I think he's the kind of the talent who I can see him in his peak averaging, I would say 20 a game. I think he can get to that level. But that's maybe a little less, maybe like 17, 18 a game. He's going to give you obviously rebounding for sure, but I think he's going to be a really, really underrated, really nice passer. He's made a lot of great reads as a playmaker, and so I can see him averaging 4 or 5 assists in his peak while being an elite defender. And obviously, that kind of player is an all-star talent. No denying that. So that's kind of where I see it. I don't think he's in a superstar status where I can see in an Amin's peak and even maybe a Cam Whitmore's peak with that superstar status. Just I don't really see superstar with Jarris.
So who has the lowest floor out of these 5?
Out of these 5, lowest floor, I would probably say, and I'm gonna say a star, and that's because if the shot isn't there, it's going to be a hard time really keeping him on the floor. Besides his defense, so I think he's not the level of a playmaker or handler. I think his handle is about the same as Amin's, but I think he isn't. He's a lot worse to get into the spots than Amin is, and Amin's first step is a little bit better, so that results in a lot more advantages for him to get to the rim. Whereas Sar, he can get to the rim at the same time he relies on step backs, and he's not efficient at that. He likes to do it, but he's not efficient. So I don't know. It's a process of him being probably as a catch and shoot kind of 3-and-D kind of role when he comes in, and if that shot isn't there, I kind of see a low floor.
So who has the lowest ceiling out of these 5?
I would say the lowest ceiling. is going to be Hendricks, I think. I just don't see Hendricks being more than a legit 3-and-D kind of 16, 15 a game max kind of guy. I just don't think the scoring's real. I know you see 15 a game, but I think most of that was due to lobs, off ball cutting, catch and shoot threes, and as a creator, he's never been a creator. He wasn't a creator at UCF, so I doubt he's a creator in the league. And he just doesn't have a good enough handle or good enough first step to be a guy who can get his own shot. So he's just going to be limited offensively. So I kind of see at least the lowest ceiling as an offensive guy.
Okay. Interesting. So I noticed you're not really saying too much about Cam Whitmore. Is he just kind of like, I know you picked him at number 3, but like, tell me more about his game. Like, cause I have not been high on Cam Whitmore. So I guess, and I don't think he's a bad prospect at all. I just think he's more, I think there's a real shot that he just ends up being like a 6th man for a team. Like I can see him having a similar career to maybe like an Eric Gordon, where it was solid, but it felt like there's a little bit more meat left. There's more meat left on the bones at the end of his career. So I guess maybe, talk me into Cam Whitmore a little bit, man.
Okay, so starting off, I'm gonna start where Cam. I feel like he's taken jumps throughout his whole career. He's a fantastic athlete, but as a shooter in EYBL and when he was in high school, he was a 20% kind of guy. He wasn't efficient. His free throw shooting was even worse. So he was never a shooter, but then we came into FIBAs this year. And by the way, he was extremely dominant there. Even though the competition was lacking, he was a force athletically speaking. And he shot 47% from deep. And so when we saw him at Villanova this year, he shot 34, 35%, which is improved since he was in high school in EYBL. So I would say he's growing as a shooter every single time. And then athletically speaking, he's fantastic. His first step is really, really impressive for someone his height and his body. He's obviously built like an NBA talent at just 16, 17 when he was. So he's been an NBA level athlete since he was young, and his shooting's improving. I would say the concern is his processing is just he's not there as a playmaker. He misses a lot of open stuff because he would slash, put his head down, and then just take a shot that isn't there, and he would get blocked when he has a wide open guy right there. So I would say coming into the league, NBA organizations are going to probably put him in situations where he would have to make the kick out or correct read instead of just putting your head down and slashing. But obviously, as an athlete, is special, but I think there's a lot of holes in his game, and I would say the handle is also pretty effective. He's got a low handle, and it's tight, and it's efficient and effective. And so if he puts it all together, I think he's a all-star kind of talent. It's just when we say the words, can he put it all together? We've heard that a lot about a lot of prospects before that are athletically gifted, but never really put it all together. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how he develops. I think the upside is very high. I still think he's going to be even in his floor. I think he's going to be a 10-year guy. But again, I'm not sure what will happen with his career.
So out of Amin, Asur, and Cam Whitmore, who are you buying to put it all together?
I think I'm in, and I would say honestly the Twins have a higher chance at hitting than Cam because I mean, the work ethic those guys have are just second to none. They've gotten better in a lot of aspects of their game. Their handle is improved every single time I've seen them play. They get better defensively. But the one thing they don't improve on, Basar improved a lot better on this year, was their shooting. It's really hard to see though those two being NBA level shooters in their careers. Where it's Cam, it's a lot more likely. It's just I've seen Cam sag on defense. He's been kind of lazy in sorts. In offense, he could be a lot more dominant, but he doesn't want to be dominant. And I don't know. There's also issues with injuries coming into the season. Cam was hurt, so he kind of recovered and he kind of slowed off start. But I don't know. It's just I see with the Twins they're a lot more hungry and they want to be great. While Cam seems like he's just athletically gifted and kind of like I don't know. It's hard. I just think Amins has the best chance out of those three.
Okay. Out of these 5 prospects, I might be jumping ahead just a little bit, but it's on my sheet right here. But what prospect out of these 5 has the right blend of potential and fit for you?
Jarris. I think Jarris.
I think so too. I'm glad we're on the same page with that because man, I'm gonna get so excited when they draft him at 5 in this next draft. It's gonna be awesome.
I hope so. I hope.
Did you ask him about the passing with Jarris or no?
Yeah, no, I mentioned it throughout. He's just a really good feel. He's a good feel as a passer, which you don't see it. You don't see that in a 6'8", 240 guy. Making the correct reads. So,
but where do you see him thriving as a passer with the Pistons, or like I guess really what in any role? Like, kind of explain it for the people watching and listening. What do you mean when you say that? Like, because some people say, like, you hear a great passer, they're like, well, I mean, he's not a point guard, so who cares? Like, explain how he's a good passer.
Okay, so Jarris isn't ever going to have a high usage day one when it comes to the Pistons, so he's not going to be kind of this playmaker who's averaging a lot of assists because of his high usage. He's going to be put in that 4 position most likely. So what Jarris has is an opportunities you can do. You can have Cade run the pick and roll, and you have Jarris on the screen where Cade makes the pass, and then Jarris is instant. He makes instant reads where he gets the ball and already sees a guy like Ivy or Hami cutting, so he makes that pass right there, no hesitation. So he's just a really I don't know how to explain it necessarily. You're never going to play him as like a guy he can handle the ball, but I don't think he's going to be a handler. He's just going to be a short roll kind of cutter, and he's going to make the correct reads whenever he has it. You can play him even post up. He can make the correct reads. You can make the correct reads as a pick and roll kind of guy. It's just there's endless options to play Jarris. You can play nearly every single position and somehow look effective at it. So he's just a really versatile talent.
I mean, I thought you explained it pretty well just right there because, again, I don't think people understand, like, coming off that short roll where he gets the ball in like a half a second, he's either taking a shot or passing to somebody, whether he's kicking it weak side or throwing a lob to Duran. Like what you're saying is the possibilities are endless with him playing that 4 spot in that, kind of like I always say, like a secondary playmaker, just a guy that processes the game and makes the right reads. Like, yeah, I thought you broke it down pretty great, man.
All right, thanks. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I don't know. He feels like a Trey Weaver guy. Like the more we talk about him, just like a defensive, like you guys, like a specialist, like a Swiss Army knife that can basically defend all 5 positions. His help side defense alone, I think, would help out the Pistons a lot. But I think my only concern is, do you believe he could like put it together offensively where, he's just not a one-dimensional player where he's just known for his defense?
I think he's very underrated offensively. And I say this because when I watched IMG, I get it. It's high school, it's prep school ball compared to college. It's a different game. But he was running the point guard. He was creating his own shot, and there's stuff he showed flashes at Houston. But you already had 3 lead guards and Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shed, Trayman Mark, and those are the guys getting their own shots. So you didn't need Jarris to be that guy, but he's capable of it. I think he's got a lot of potential in the mid-range shot. His handle is, I would say, underrated. I don't think people talk about his handle being effective. I think it's going to be pretty effective, and he's also a really good athlete. His first step is very nice, and he's a vertical threat as well. He can play him as a lob threat too. So there's, again, with his playmaking, there's endless opportunities to be a scorer. And also as a passer, and I think as an offensive scorer, I think there's a lot of options you can play him as. So I think he's just a very versatile in general. You can play him in a lot of different ways, and he'll still be effective.
Is there a prospect that you'd be able to reach for at 5? Let's just say Amin, Jarace Walker are off the board. Pistons are up at 5. And, there's a guy that's not being talked about, and a guy that you scouted, you're like, man, in a different draft, this would be my guy at 5. Who is that sleeper prospect for you?
Okay, so honestly, the main 4 that are kind of being talked about are kind of the players I would take on 5.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily reach for anyone. There's a way I would trade back for 9 and 16. I would do it if I can get one of those. So I don't know. There's a couple of guys I would like. I just don't see them at. I don't really get what I don't. I wouldn't personally take them at 5. I would say Violet Kalumbe in Metropolitans. He's been very, very productive, but again, he's very raw. He's kind of a project, and he doesn't have the athletic gifts that Amin has. So, I mean, he's obviously athletically gifted too, but it's just why would I want to get him and when I can get Amin, where I believe he has more potential? So, I wouldn't say there's a necessarily a prospect I would reach for at 5, but there would be a prospect I like. I would do it for 9 and 16.
All right, then we'll just change the question up a little bit. Say the Pistons draft back inside the first round. We'll just say they're drafting at 10 because we talked about the Dallas Mavericks. Is there a guy at 10 that you like that fits this team? Or just, I mean, like me and Anthony have talked about Jordan Hawkins at number 10. But who is your guy at number 10 you would take?
It's definitely going to be Bryce Sensabaugh. That's the guy I've liked since high school. And he's really talented. I don't know how do you fit. He's just kind of this spark plug off the bench day one, I would say. Who you would want him to improve the defense and playmaking, obviously, but he's just such a special scorer. I think he's gonna be effective day one in any NBA organization. So that would kind of be my guy. And also, I would really love. I would actually really like Grady Dick. And not for the name. The name is gonna be. Yeah, I mean it's gonna be the most sold rookie jersey besides Wemby, but I would say Grady fits the need that we need is shooting, and he fits that. And I also think he's very underrated defensively. So if he hits as a defender and he becomes a legit 3-and-D kind of guy, he's making his money day one. So yeah, I'm pretty high on him too. And we don't need centers, but I love the long-term bet on Lively. But that's again, we have too much center, so I wouldn't gamble with another one.
Okay. What about like someone like a Keontae George? I don't think he'd go. We were talking about him earlier when we first started doing this podcast earlier in the season. I don't think he goes at number 10, but like a guy like him, I really like his game. And I think there's still even just a fit for a scorer like that on the Pistons. Because I think you could play him with Ivy and Cade Cunningham, and it would still make sense.
Yeah, I really really like Keontae, and he's kind of this guy he's tough. He's strong. He gets to the rim, and even if he's not the most efficient player, he's taking and hitting shots that are NBA level as a college talent. I think the fit is going to be overcomplicated. I feel like I don't really see that working because again, none of those 3 talents you described besides Cade. I think Ivy's still improving as a defender, but I think he's not at the effective enough level. And Keontae himself, he started the season off in Baylor as a really promising defender, but then cooled off and became very lazy defensively. And so I just don't really see Keontae fitting at the 3 day one. You shouldn't play him at the 3, but he played the 3 at Baylor, and I always thought that was the wrong decision. But I mean, it could work. I'm just not the biggest fan of it. But if we didn't have Ivy or Cade, I would be all in for Keontae.
Okay. Which prospect is day one ready from what you've seen? I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, and I believe you said Jarace Walker, but I mean, you can just throw out, it doesn't just have to be for the Pistons, but what prospects are day one ready coming out of this draft?
I think the most day one ready is the guy going number 1. I think he's ready. I think he was ready the moment he stepped on Metropolitans this year, and what he did in the French league at only 19 years old it rivals just best of the best in European prospects. So I think he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer the moment he steps on.
Damn. Any other prospects though that you think are day one ready? They don't necessarily have to be like 20-point scores, but just contributors to teams.
Okay. For sure, Scoot Henderson. Obviously, I think he's going to make an impact. I would say Brandon Miller makes an impact, and this isn't just another Jabari Smith situation. He actually has the ability to get his own shot, and he doesn't struggle with doing so. So I would say Brandon makes an impact day one. I would say Jarris also, obviously Jarris is a guy. I think Hendricks makes a solid impact day one. I would say Grady Dick, Kason Wallace, and even guys throwing it out just a little deeper. I think Jordan Hawkins makes an impact day one. And then second round guys, Brandon Podziemski makes an impact. I think Trace Jackson Davis, he's an old school kind of talent, but I think if you give him the minutes, he'll make an impact. And I can throw out some other guys, but that would be too much. So I think those guys.
I had a question about a prospect that I think a lot of Pistons fans have been. I don't want to say they're sleeping on him, but I kind of call him like a poor man's Brandon Miller. That's Gigi Jackson. Do you think he falls to 31?
I think definitely I think so. And it's because, and obviously if you know me, so I have some people on my contacts that are in NBA circles, and so NBA agents. I've talked to one who said Gigi Jackson, in a workout, left midway because he was out of shape, and then he got caught smoking a vape pen, and that was another workout in Utah. Yeah, another workout in Utah where it was a drill where you're supposed to run across the court, right? So he was walking, and then when they told him to pick it up, he was jogging instead of running. So there's issues with him being pretty lazy, and he has his own issues with his ego, and but there's no denying the talent. It's just stuff like that. Those are job opportunities. Those are your workouts to make a name for yourself in front of the organizations. So if he's not taking that seriously, I don't know if that's the kind of guy Weaver would want, because Weaver is so focused on fundamental about guys who have great characters and who want to work. So I love Gigi as a talent. That those are stuff you can't deny. There are issues. So I think he might be there at 31. I think it's possible. I don't know if Weaver's going to bite. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
But speaking of the second round, say the Pistons keep the 31st pick instead of trading back in. Who do you like at 31?
If we keep that at 31, I think three guys kind of come to mind who I want, and obviously Gigi Jackson would be one of those. But I would throw in, I think, Trace Jackson Davis, and that's kind of a guy who I think makes an impact day one regardless, because his feel and awareness and skill set is just so advanced. Even if he's not a shooter, he's going to make an impact. And I also would go Maxwell Lewis from Pepperdine. I think he's very underrated. So those are my three.
I've heard his name thrown out a lot. So,
You don't think they do a draft and stash and draft the Vucevic guy?
It's very possible, and I don't know. It's very. I know last year the only reason why I picked Prashida was because they didn't want to waste a roster spot, and so they just called our European scout, international scout, to tell who's best available, and so Prashida was the pick. So I don't necessarily think we do that again this year, but if we do, it's probably going to be one of Vukovic or James Najee. But I don't know. I'm kind of sick of that, honestly. I want I want one of our guys to hit and play.
Yeah, I mean, I know we mentioned it before we went live. I think we were talking like Saban Lee and Isaiah Livers were probably hits. I mean, you've had like Servetus, Balsa. It's been bad, man. Like I'm just like looking at Tankathon. I was like, yeah, they'd probably draft that guy because he's European. Just hoping he's the next Jokic.
Hope not. I really don't. I mean, I like him. It's just I'm kind of out on going for stash again. It's just I can't.
do we have any Q&A questions?
We got a shitload, but I wasn't paying attention. My bad.
But I mean, maybe we can get to know Amin a little bit better. Man, I keep saying your name differently. I apologize for that. But how did you get into basketball scouting? Why Anthony looks up some questions for us?
So I've always been a basketball fan my whole life. My family's been, my dad mainly, but he's been kind of a basketball fan. So he threw me into the wave of. So I'm from. My parents are from another country, and so he threw me on the wave of Drazen Petrovic when I was little, from the Nets. So I always liked him, and so I always started with watching European players and translate to the NBA. and so I've always been an NBA fan, but also a EuroLeague fan. So I've kind of been attached to different leagues in the world throughout the league, and so I've always been kind of curious on who's outside of just the NBA. So that's when I kind of get into college scouting, and then now EYBL, grassroots, whatever. And I'm just kind of trying to find all types of talents who can make an impact in the NBA. So since I was little, I've been watching basketball, but more so these past 3 years, I've been into actual scouting for prospects at least.
It's pretty cool. One thing I always said about European players, like I was always just surprised when NBA teams draft a European guy that couldn't get off the bench, whether it was like a Dragon Bender or a Nicholas Davishki, someone like that. Yeah, they probably had loads of potential, but I've always said draft a European guy like a Kristaps Porzingis who's actually contributing to his team. You know, I mean, I always thought that I don't know why, but I always thought it was just so simple. I'm like, if you're looking for the European players, just look for the young guys that are actually playing meaningful minutes on a team, because if they can get meaningful minutes at that young of an age in a league like the European League or whatever, they could probably do it eventually in the NBA. But so many of these European guys were drafted that were averaging like 3 minutes per game. And I never understood that. You know, that was just my thing watching European players. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's just something.
No, I agree in that sense. I just think it's very hard to evaluate European competition because, in the ACB league, they're never going to rely, or EuroLeague, they're never going to play young talents that are 18, 19. And if they do, they usually don't play that much minutes. So when we saw Luka, obviously, won MVP of the EuroLeague, he was special and everyone knew it. It's just I felt like there's a misconception with his athleticism. He wouldn't translate, and obviously he translated more than most people expected. So it's really an interesting process to see kind of how NBA teams evaluate European talents. And I think since Jokic and Luka kind of panned out, they're now going a little more in depth. So I don't know. It's just I think there's always been kind of a bubble. I think even since throwing it back to when Drazen was one of the first European NBA players, they've taken that more serious in the scouting. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. If I don't know any first round talents in the European besides Wemby and Baila Kalumbe, but outside of that, you're just seeing more and more European talents kind of emerge into the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. It was just, I don't know. I was even like looking. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be in European League, but like, I think it was. I forget what the league is over in France, but there were some guys where they're playing in some of these other leagues where they're just not getting off the bench, and I'm like, why take the chance on a guy that can't get off the bench? I understand sometimes teams just don't like to play younger guys, but I feel like most coaches will understand, like, I got to play this guy if he's talented enough. I just feel like sometimes, I don't know, teams they just overthink it, and it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Wow, yeah, definitely.
I don't know. But anyways, if we got a Q&A, I'll shut up and we can just answer this.
Yeah, we have this is more a free agency question, especially with the Bradley Beal trade, which I'm still trying to process. I don't understand it. But it has to do with Kyle Kuzma, and do we think the Pistons will obtain him now that he said he's going to plan on opting out of his player option? So I'll just hand it over to you, Lance, because I know you're more of a local guy. You kind of you love Kuzma, you love all the local guys, and you want out all the local guys to play for the Pistons. It seems like.
Oh, that would be such a good team if they did. Monte Morris running the point, be incredible. I kind of already think Kyle Kuzma is what he is. I mean, if you could get him in, I think we were talking about this last week. If you could kind of play more of like a Jeremy Grant role like he was in Denver, cutting to the basket, playing more off the ball, not focusing so much on the isolations, taking tough shots. Yeah, I take a chance. I just don't know if that's Kyle Kuzma's game anymore. I don't want the Pistons to sign a guy that is going to take the ball out of Cade or Jaden Ivey's hands. I want to trust those guys to make the right decisions, and I want whoever they're bringing in to be able to play off of him. And I just don't know if that's Kyle Kuzma's game anymore.
I mean, his defense scares the shit out of me, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But, I mean, offensively, what is he? Maybe a second option here?
I want him to be like a third option.
Yeah, that's my problem because you're gonna have to pay him to get him. He's not gonna come for what he's making. I think he's opting out of a $13 million contract. He's probably looking for at least 15 or 20 in the open market, in my opinion.
But wow, Pistons draft talk. I am so sorry. What are your thoughts on Kyle Kuzma playing for the Pistons?
No, you're all good. Don't worry. But Kuzma Pistons, not the biggest fan of it. Personally, I'm not. I don't know how they're going to mesh well with Kuzma. He's obviously a very talented scorer. I do agree with Pistons talk. A defense that just scares the fucking hell out of me. So I don't know. There's a lot of good and there's a lot of concerns with him. I still think he's the guy who's going to provide if he gets to the Pistons, but I don't really see us, going for Kuzma. Honestly, I just don't see it, and I don't see the type of reason to really rush the process. Honestly, if we were gonna, invest all our cards into it, I can kind of see more likely like a guy like Cam Johnson. I would say it would be a little more likely. You want the versatility on defense as well as the shooting on offense. So I don't know. I'm not really in on Kuzma.
So, what are you looking for from free agents though to come to the Pistons? Like, what kind of, you mentioned Cam Johnson. Is that kind of like the archetype you're looking for here in Detroit?
I'm probably going to go with a answer that isn't as favorable compared to what most I'm seeing most Pistons fans on Twitter are saying or Instagram. I don't want to really speed up the process and throw all our money into one guy who maybe is talented, but he's not like a game changer. And I don't want to throw 30 million on a guy like Cam Johnson. I was more so get a couple guys who fit the system and fit what we want, what Weaver wants, what Monte wants. In our guys, we get three of those guys, and they all play a really massive part into our future instead of throwing all our cards into one guy. But we'll see what happens on free agency. It's just I think it's going to be interesting no matter what.
No, I've said the same thing where I don't want them to make a big splash in free agency. I mean, if you can get Cam Johnson, that's great. But if you could fill out the rest of the roster with some, like, I don't know what kind of tier you'd put them in, but some solid rotation pieces, I'd be fine with that. Some names I've thrown out are like Josh Richardson, Kelly Oubre, Harrison Barnes was another name we were talking about as well. Guys like that fit those type of roles, or a Dante DiVincenzo, or a Javon Carter, just a backup guard that can give you some minutes and spell either Ivy or Cade Cunningham. Those are the type of players I'm looking for in free agency.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at too. And I know this is a name that a lot of people threw out earlier, I guess. Well, still now, but Jalen McDaniels. I think that's also a pretty good fit as well.
I'd like his brother more, but I'll take him.
Yeah, I mean his brothers. If he was available, I would love him. I don't think Minnesota are gonna let go that easily.
I don't know. Cats keeps talking crazy. They might.
I hope so.
Cats is. I don't know. Someone needs to take his phone away from him, saying that his playoff run was more memorable than Jokic's. But hey, this is a draft question. It has to do with Jarace Walker, who we've talked about a lot. Can Walker catch and shoot better than Stu right now? What are y'all seeing?
So is he okay? I got it. So I personally think they're at the same level. I don't think Stewart's a exceptional shooter. He's a fine shooter who's not even fine. I think he needs to improve. I don't think he's a bad shooter. I also don't think Jarace Walker's a great shooter. I think he's a fine shooter at the same tier. So I kind of see Jarace coming into that 33, 34 range, kind of where I see Stewart next year at. I think they both have some mechanical issues, but for the most part, I think they're just fine. I also don't think Jarace is ever going to be at a 40% kind of clip either.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I think Stewart's shooting is actually pretty legit. I just think, he started off like really crappy and then he got hot and then he had a shoulder injury. So, I mean, it was kind of like a weird season for him. But honestly, usually I plant my flag in a prospect. Like last year, it was Jaden Ivey. This year, like, I don't even have a guy. Like, it's like the first time in a long time. Like, I'm just happy whoever we get at 5 personally, because I think there's just so many options. And like you're talking about Amin, I was trying to tell Lance last week like how special he is with like his handle and his passing, his processing. Like, if he's at 5, like I would probably take him, but I don't see him falling to 5.
Yeah, but I just love Jarace Walker, like how Pistons Draft Talk was talking about him playing at that 4 spot and everything he could do after the pick and roll as a secondary playmaker. Like, that's what I see. You know what I'm saying? Like, that it makes your offense so much more versatile. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just deeper, and it confuses teams. I just love having a guy like that. And, you know, outside of the shooting, there's just so much Jarace Walker brings to a team. There's so many tools in the tool bag. Like, that's what I see in him, man. Just, he can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'll do one more question, and we can wrap it up because I don't know if you have to be anywhere. But Ryan wants to know how you feel about Killian Hayes.
Okay, Killian, I mean, I don't know. I really, really want to believe in Killian. There's every single game, there's at least one flash of that he can be a lot better than he is right now. But there was that little stretch he had last year that was also very encouraging. But he just really, still struggled as a shooter, as a as a creator. He hasn't really been efficient off the dribble either. He makes some nice raises as a playmaker. It's just defensively, he also has some nice flashes. I don't really see us unless he doesn't improve that much next season. I don't really see us keeping him in the long-term plans. And he's kind of a guy where I kind of vision him going from team to team, trying to find a spot. And there's nothing wrong with trying to make your way into the league still after not panning out. But I don't know. I don't really see. He has got NBA traits, but he's not really there together as an NBA talent. I just think he isn't there right now.
Would you want to see him make a position change? This is what I've been saying about him. Like, I don't think he's ever going to lead anybody's team. I don't really care for him as a point guard anymore. Like, I would rather see them simplify and give him less responsibility on offense and just use some of those. Like, I feel like you could honestly put Killian Hayes as a screener and then dump the ball off him, and he could make a quick pass or, process the game doing something like that. But I'd rather see him play the 2, focus on defense, and just focus on making cuts to the basket and just doing the little things that can help a team win. I just don't want to see him lead a team anymore, because I think that's just not going to be his role in the NBA. I just don't see it from him anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's just we've seen throughout the 3 years Killian's been at is as a creator, and that's kind of what we wanted him when he was a draft pick. Obviously, a lot of people talked about how good how good he is as a shot maker and creator. And throughout his 3 years, he struggled at that. He hasn't really been. And at the same time, he likes to do too much with his handle.
Yeah.
He has a good handle, but he does too much with it, and so. If he just simplified things and made it easier for himself, he could really be a guy who's a legit, backup option. And I'm not going to throw out. I know he's a former Piston, and just he didn't really pan out in the Pistons, but I thought he was solid. But now he has a backup role in the NBA after kind of being viewed as a draft bust. But I think Dennis Smith Jr. is a prime example of adapting to your league. Because obviously, Dennis was not a good shooter, and everyone knows that. But he kind of just adapted as a fantastic defender who makes the right reads on offense, who doesn't oversimplify, who overcomplicates things. So if Killian can just kind of limit himself and be what he is as a playmaker and as a defender and hit the occasional open 3, I think he's got a spot in the league if he just, trims it down.
Yeah, but I envision him still playing with Cade and Jaden Ivey this upcoming season, but I would be sick to my stomach if they have him bringing the ball up the floor when you have Cade and Jaden Ivey on the floor with him.
Dude, he's not starting with them, though.
I'm not. No. I'm not saying he's going to start. I'm not saying he's going to start, but they all have great size where all 3 of them could play on the floor. And I think Killian is still such a great defender. There's still a role for him in the league. But what I'm saying is I would rather see him change his offensive game where he has less responsibilities. Again, not as a starter, But if he's on the floor with Cade and Jaden Ivey, because I still see that happening this upcoming season, I don't want to see him with the ball in his hands. I just rather have him take a back seat to those two. And I don't know if they would let him do that. I don't know if he has any. That's why I want to see him in a different role offensively. Because again, the defense, I think legit. He could still be a really good defender in this league. But I think the problem is, and what destroys his confidence is, he just tries to do too much offensively. And I think that since he is a good playmaker and he has good vision, he can play off the ball and find those spots that he's used to passing to and create open looks for himself without the ball in his hand. That's what I think Killian could do. And I think that's I would try to, if I was him, I would try to adapt my game to fit to play alongside Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. Because I mean, as a point guard, like I already said, it just doesn't work for him. Like he's just not good at it.
I think that's why they put him on the bench. I think that's why Casey said, you know what, you're not starting material. Be the backup with Corey out there. I think that's what his role is going to be as a backup point guard, and I'm completely fine with that. I will disagree. I think I'd feel fine with him having the ball in his hands. I think if he command the second unit, I'm fine with it. I think the Dallas game this year, that's what I thought Killian Hayes was going to be coming out. If you remember the Dallas Maverick game where he went crazy, he went for like 20 points. I think there's still potential there, untapped potential. It's just, he's just one of those players where it's going to take him a little bit longer. I just don't know if the Pistons are patient enough to develop it. And I just don't think they are. I think by the time he puts it all together, they're probably a playoff team. But I think give him one more year as a backup point guard, see what he can do. I mean, you saw what Monty did with Cameron Payne. He basically made him into a serviceable player. I think he can do the same thing with Killian. Not saying he's going to be a lights out shooter or anything like that, but he's still a good defensive player, really good passer. I think he's one of the better passers on this team. It's just, I think sometimes, like you guys said, he just dribbles it too much with his handle. He just needs to, go for the first look that he sees. And I think he'll be fine.
But he could still be a great passer without playing point guard. I don't think he'll be a backup point guard. I think he'll be, if he continues playing point guard, he'll probably be a third string in the league. I just think that he has other skill sets that he should focus on and try to create a role for himself as a defensive player and someone that doesn't need the ball in his hands. Just move a little bit without it. I just think there's other ways he can be successful in the NBA, but as a point guard, it's just not going to happen for him. Whether it's a backup starter, whatever, it's just, he won't be I don't think he'll be in the league that long as a point guard. I just don't think it's there.
I mean, Alfred Payton was, Killian will be.
I mean, man, I don't know.
That's just my take on it. We're not going to make this a Killian podcast. But we don't really have any more questions. So if you do want to wrap this up, we can. Pistons Draft Talk, do you have anything you're working on right now that you want to plug, or where people can follow you on social media to keep up with you?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm my Twitter, I think, is linked here. I do draft coverage. I'll do summer league coverage for every single Piston we have. I'll post that as well. So what I kind of do is I like throwing out highlights because some people who miss the game can see the highlights. At the same time, I give a mini breakdown on what they did that game. So I do that on Twitter. I also do on Instagram the same thing, where I have I just started it, but it's going pretty good. So Instagram, Twitter, it's under Pistons Draft Talk as well. My Instagram is actually under PDT Media, so it's the abbreviation of my Pistons Draft Talk. And I didn't want to say Pistons, so I want to do media instead, so players can be more appropriate with that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just trying to do my own thing, and I'm enjoying the process. So that's kind of where I'm at.
For sure. I do have your Twitter and your Instagram down in the description if you guys do want to follow him and check out his work. But Lance, if you have any other questions or you want to just wrap this up, you can tell the people where they can rate the podcast, where they can find it, and all that other stuff.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for listening to the Pistons Talk Podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.
Peace, guys.
Have a good one.